All right, Sandra, Jonathan Schanzer is a senior vice president for research at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies and a former terrorism finance analyst at the Department of the Treasury. He joins us now. So when you look at this, Jonathan, Iran, like it did several years ago when it threw some missiles at the Al-Assad airbase, through diplomatic channels, told the U.S. we're going to do this. Literally all the missiles were shot down or landed harmlessly. I mean, how do you analyze what Iran did here and how Israel might possibly respond? I mean, it looks like it's another one of those cases where Iran felt that it had to respond in some way, knowing that it was going to be completely ineffective and embarrass itself really on the world stage, though none of that ever gets distributed among the Iranian people. The Iranian people only know that they attacked Israel.
Well, I think that's right, and there is a bit of posturing here, but I think we need to be fair and at least note that there was probably a higher success rate than what we saw, for example, in April when Iran fired something like 400 different missiles and drones at Israel. A handful got through, something like 8. I think more got through tonight. I think they learned from the last go-around with Israel, and so I think they had a higher success rate, but I still don't think they were able to hit anything significant. What I think they've done, though, is they've just kicked the hornet's nest. I think the Israelis at this point, and they're saying it right now, we've heard from Israeli officials, we heard from their spokesperson just about a half hour ago, that Israel has capabilities and plans already put in place. By the way, they had a pretty good sense that this was coming some 6 or 7 hours ago. I was getting wind of this early this morning. So they are pretty well penetrated right now into the Iranian defense establishment, and I think they have some very specific plans. The last time in April, the U.S. prevailed upon Israel to only fire 1 or 2 shots at the Iranians to let them know that they could hit deeper into Iranian airspace. I think we're going to see a much tougher response right now from Israel.
Just getting some more reaction off the wires here. Jonathan, welcome to you, and thanks for joining our live coverage here. Hamas praises Iranian missile strikes, avenging the deaths of those Hezbollah leaders. That is the way that is coming across right now. You can only imagine the response there with Hamas leaders to this, Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, look, of course, the entire Iranian axis, the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria, they're all going to be cheering this. And I think if you look at the way that the Iranian regime has talked about it over the last hour or so, the messaging is this is a response to the killing of Ismail Haniyeh, that Hamas leader that was killed in downtown Tehran in late July. This is a response to the killing of Hassan Nasrallah, the Secretary General, in that dramatic attack that took place on Friday, and perhaps even some of the other senior Iranian officials who've been killed as well in some of these Israeli attacks, these very targeted attacks. So you're going to see people cheering this across the Iranian axis. But I think if we look on balance at what has happened over the last 5 days or so, the Israelis have done immense damage to the Iranian axis, and I think very little damage was done today. Of course, we still need to wait and hear from the Israelis about what was hit and what wasn't. There were some missiles that fell inside Israel, but I think most of them were neutralized by that Iron Dome, David Sling, and Arrow defense system, that 3-layer defense system that Israel has built with American assistance.
Yeah, Daniel Hagari said that a couple fell in the center and the southern part of the country. We also saw some that appeared to fall into the Mediterranean. When the bomb went off, you seemed to be able to see the reflection on the water. But with Israel so heavily involved in Gaza and now taking on Hezbollah and in quite an effective way as well. I mean, going after their pagers, then their backup radios, and then targeting the leadership, taking out Nasrallah. I mean, that was a very, very bold move. Does Israel really want to get involved in Iran right now, or does it want to sit back and wait?
Well, it's interesting because I think for the last 11 months, you got to remember, Israel's been fighting 7 fronts over the last 11 months. And what they've been hearing from this White House is, we don't want escalation, don't take this any further. And Israel's been listening largely to what the White House has been saying. And what that has done is it's only brought more violence against them. In other words, Hezbollah has fired 8,000 rockets at Israel the entire time they've been asked to stand down, right? I mean, and Iran fired all these missiles. All these Shiite militias out of Iraq and Syria have been firing rockets and drones and missiles. The Houthis have been doing the same. Holding back has done very little for Israel. And I think they're now of the opinion, and I think they're probably right, that it's time to go on the offensive and to reestablish deterrence.
So if you go on the offense, what do you do?
Well, I think you continue to use those targeted strikes, that intelligence-driven operation set that they have, taking out people like Nasrallah, taking out 75% of Hezbollah's top leadership, possibly taking out some of Iran's nuclear facilities. I mean, really using intelligence, using advanced weaponry, and showing the Iranian axis that there is no way to win. They need to force Iran into submission here. That is something that I think the Israelis have arrived at this conclusion. And I think that's the only way this war ends. Otherwise, the Israelis fight a war of attrition. And by the way, the U.S. gets dragged into this. We've been hit by the Houthis. We've been hit by these Shiite militias. This thing needs to end, and it cannot continue in perpetuity. I think that's what the Israelis are saying.
All right, we'll keep watching and waiting to see what happens. Jonathan, thank you for being with us. Appreciate
Thank you.
Senator?